Stephen Mayne is the director of the Australian Shareholders Association, and he joins us now in the studio. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
What did you make of Rupert Murdoch's performance?
Well, I thought it was fascinating for history. I thought he was sharper and faster than when he appeared before the parliamentary committee. He was quite defiant, and his absolutist statements were quite incredible. I mean, he's the most powerful family in the world, and he's denying the undeniable, saying, I've never asked for any favours. And I think the problem he's going to have with that is that a whole bunch of prime ministers are going to be able to come out and say, well, actually, things are a bit different than that.
Yeah, and the point was made by Robert J as well. It's not as black and white as Rupert Murdoch might like to see it. He used a phrase Paul Keating used many years ago in that Paul Keating said you could do a deal with Rupert Murdoch without thinking that you've actually done a deal. There is a lot more ways of subtly dealing with people like Rupert Murdoch.
Well, that's right. Rupert himself admitted that the way he negotiates with prime ministers is it's megaphone diplomacy through the editorials of The Sun, the world's biggest selling
without
daily
going
tabloid.
to Number 10 or The Lodge and directly asking for a favour.
Yeah, so he does it every day through his editorial. He admitted that. But then he also admitted he had 75 meetings with prime ministers of the UK over the last 30-odd years, and that's before all the phone calls and all his minions. So he has massive contact as well as telling them all how to behave through the daily tabloid.
And Gordon Brown has already come out and denied the claim that Rupert Murdoch made that he had declared war on his company.
Yeah, and that's the problem Rupert's going to have, is you can make these massive denials, but there's 30 and 40 years of evidence and many, many memoirs written by his former editors and minions quoting him, you know, that he does gloat about power and he does try and influence power.
Yeah.
So, you know, Gordon Brown, I think that was fascinating. And Rupert was puzzled when asked about the war that Gordon Brown supposedly declared. Well, what we saw last night was part of the war. The Labor Party is actually Gordon Brown's mate. You know, the MP through the parliamentary committee has been trying to destroy Rupert.
In contrast to that theory about megaphone diplomacy, we had Rupert Murdoch saying that he's never told editors what to write. Another one of his very absolutist statements last night.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, how can he claim to, you know, take a personal interest in every single editorial in The Sun? I worked for Rupert for 7 years. Everybody knows that, you know, if he declares a position, then you fall in behind it. That is the culture of news.
But he can say that. He can declare a position and quite happily say that he's never directly told an editor what to write in a leader or what to put on a front page of a tabloid.
That's right. I mean, you know, if you know he's backing George Bush, well, then you know you've got to back the Iraq War, and that's what happens right across.
A brave editor to go to the contrary.
Yeah, that's right. So, you know, fascinating stuff, and looking forward to another 3 hours, you know, tonight, where we will have more focus on phone hacking and all that sort of stuff.
Let's just talk about Robert J for a moment. Michael Wolff, who's Rupert Murdoch's biographer, has been quite critical of his line of questioning, and he thought that if you were looking at it in terms of a boxing match, that Robert J basically got knocked out.
Well, I think that's wrong. This wasn't Kerry Packer back in 1992 demolishing, you know, his inquisitors. Robert J had a torrent of evidence that he put to him in statements, and it was a slow cook. And I think he did quite a good job over 4 hours. When people look back at the 7 hours, he has extracted a series of, you know, insights, clarifications, confirmations of key myths and events in history, which I don't think will help Rupert over time.
He's written an opinion piece for The Guardian online, and he says the inquiry's lead counsel, Robert J., who's been a masterful interrogator of many witnesses who've come before, was reduced to demanding Murdoch confess to being, well, Murdoch.
Well, I mean, that's true. I mean, and he, Michael Wolff, has had greater insight into Rupert than any other journalist. 50 hours of private meetings ahead of his memoir. And he obviously thinks that Rupert is a massive abuser of power. And he was frustrated that Robert J didn't have the same sort of real insights into Rupert's modus operandi. And Rupert was denying himself that he was Rupert by saying, oh, you know, I'm this powerful guy, when he is the world's most powerful guy.
He doesn't have an aura. We learned that last night. He doesn't have a charisma as well.
He's not charismatic.
You see him in action. Do you think there's an aura?
Look, I don't think he's massively charismatic. It's just the power that comes with being able to influence the way millions of people work, and the power that, you know, he has because politicians bow, scrape and grovel to his every wish.
Now, let's get back to where you started. Rupert Murdoch did control himself very well. There are many people, including me, who thought that, and having watched many shareholder meetings over my career, that he'd be provoked by Robert Jay, that he'd go off the reservation. He wasn't provoked. He was very calm. His demeanour was very steady, almost like his son James Murdoch the night before, who was very, very disciplined under very, very intense questioning.
Yeah, look, he only thumped the table a few times, but I thought it was interesting that he was overheard saying to one of his aides, let's get this effing thing over today. So he clearly wasn't enjoying it, and I think he's going to have a slightly more difficult 3 hours following up because everyone's already analysing what has been said. But overall, I think he performed quite well, but he is in a very difficult position where he's got this judicial body and politicians from across the board coming after him in a major way like never before.
And we had a fascinating postscript to that evidence that led to James Murdoch revealing an email exchange with the Culture Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, with a high-profile resignation overnight.
Yeah, that's right. And this is where I think the politicians have a lot to fear, is all of their grovelling and sucking up to Rupert and News Corp over the years isn't going to work well for them. And Jeremy Hunt, the Culture Minister, was a shocker in that regard and has already lost a key advisor for treating the Murdochs in a very, very inappropriate way during the B-Sky bid.
Stephen Mayne will watch tonight with interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.